The following presentation is brought to you by the Realm Network.
It's right about time again to swerve again, confuse the general fans again.
Hello, everybody. This is Vince Russo, and welcome to this edition of the Swerve. Now, as you know, I've been doing the Swerve now for well over a year, and I like to bring on people from not only all walks of life in wrestling, but from all walks of life in general. I like to bring on friends. I like to bring on people I've never met before and I've never interviewed before. One thing about me is I really enjoy, getting to know people, because I really do believe that we are all products of our circumstances and our upbringing and our parents and where we grew up and, what influenced us as a kids, from kids to teenagers to what made us the men or the women that we are today. So I really like interviewing people. I really like getting to know people. Now, I do have a legend on the show today. But he's a legend from a different part of the country when it comes to wrestling terms. Everybody knows I grew up on Vince McMahon Sr., WWF. This man is a legend in Ohio Valley Wrestling. As a matter of fact, he was even brought into the Hall of Honor of Ohio Valley Wrestling not too long ago. He calls himself the StarMaker. His name is Kenny Bolin, and Mr. Bolin is on with young son Chris. Mr. Bolin and Chris, how are you doing today?
Doing marvelous. Such a thrill to finally be a part of your show. We've been looking very forward to this. As a matter of fact, I've told you earlier in some emails, the fan base of mine, and I'm by no means trying to compare mine to the level of you and many others in the business, but we did acquire a pretty good following at OVW. And through internet sales around the world, OVW has been sold all over the planet. So it's still an adjustment for me to even believe that people all over the world know who I am, being as I barely left Louisville, Kentucky. I did leave Louisville once and went to Nashville and did meet you very briefly behind the Titantron. An old acquaintance of ours introduced us, and that was really, I think, the only time that you and I ever met.
Yeah, and, Kenny, I was going to ask you that because I was certain, with your time in the business, and you've put in quite a bit more time than I have, and my time in the business, I was quite certain that our paths had to cross at one time. I'm going to tell you a little story, which I think you'll appreciate off the bat. But Kenny, I first have to ask you this. Listen. I did a little bit homework on you on Wikipedia. I watched some YouTube on you. You are a year older than me, but yet, Mr. Bolin, StarMaker, if you will, I'm not seeing as much gray on you as I am now. Now, Mr. Bolin, please tell me that you are using Hair Club for Men, because you're just as gray as I am.
Well, I'd love to be able to tell you that, because as a matter of fact, there's a lot of people who'd like to tell you this is a wig. For you today, and you're the only reason it's happened, I actually went down to Fantastic Sam's, spent my $15, and had him cut my hair today. He was a victim of Fantastic Sam's as well.
I won't be going back.
It didn't go quite as well for the Prince. But
no gray though, huh?
Well, there's a little in there if you look. I guess if on a bright sunny day you can find it. Some will tell you that I've never worried about anything a day in my life. I'm about as live and let live as you can get. Not too much gets to me. I don't worry about a whole lot.
Yeah, but Kenny, I'm sure about that. But Kenny, you're almost 30 years in the wrestling business. I cannot believe you do not have a full head of gray hair.
That alone, you think, would provide that full head of gray hair. I had dinner last night with Terry Garvin Sims. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him or not.
Yes.
And he was making the same comments, like, what are you doing? What are you on? As a matter of fact, our old buddy Jerry Lawler was my inspiration for getting into the wrestling business. And I did not know that he's been using the old dippity-doo and the color thing there for quite some time. I didn't know that.
Well, let's just set the record straight. Well, yeah, let's set the record straight that you let that cat out of the bag, not me. But Kenny, I got to tell you a story that I got to tell you this off the bat because you're going to love and appreciate this.
Okay.
Okay. For the last 20 years, for as long as I've been working with Jim Ross and Bruce Pritchard.
Right.
This is 20 years now. Okay. And recently, literally, it was 2 weeks ago, I did Jim Ross's podcast. Okay.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Every time I do an interview with these guys or I have a conversation with either one of them,
Mm-hmm.
they can't get through the conversation without doing their Jim Cornette imitation.
Of course.
And here's the thing, bro. The big light bulb went off over the top of my head just yesterday.
Okay.
Every time I've heard this promo for the last 20 years, both JR and both Bruce are always referencing Kenny. Oh, Kenny. Kenny. Always referencing Kenny. So now I'm reading your bio. I did not know that you and Mr. Cornette were childhood friends. And all of a sudden, I'm like, oh my God.
Oh,
After 20 years, this is the Kenny that JR and Bruce Pritchard have been talking about.
Kenny that they have been talking about. That's exactly right. I heard JR do an impersonation of me the other day. He had Abyss on. He was interviewing Abyss. So you were on after Abyss, correct?
Yes.
And he goes into a Jimmy Kenny rant on the end of the show. And he did one for Jerry Lawler. Jerry called me when he was doing the forward for my book. And JR was there doing some promotional DVD work with Jerry. And in the background, I hear Jim Ross going off on his, oh, Kenny was in the backyard. I was Jackie Fargo and he was Jerry Lawler. And it's, I can't believe you didn't know that.
Penny, I didn't know. But listen, you have to now explain to me, how did you get worked into the promo and become a permanent part of every Cornette promo that they do?
I can tell you how that happened. Jimmy used to be, as you know, so frustrated with the wrestling business is that he wanted everything to be the way it was in 1972, 1974, 1976, maybe into 1979. And then after that, Jimmy starts getting disgruntled, as you know. So he would tell the stories to Vince McMahon, Vince Russo, Pritchard, because I'm sure you heard a few of them as well. You just didn't realize it was me. He would tell you guys the stories about how things were when we were childhood friends. We'd be up on the roof watching wrestling. We'd be connecting an antenna to the fire department antenna so we could get channel 36 in Lexington. So we could get channel 4 in Indianapolis and watch Dick the Bruiser's product. So we could get Bolin, Green, Kentucky and watch Sterling Brewer. So we could pick up maybe even Memphis when the sunspots were bad and get their broadcast early so we could see it a week before it aired up here. We had cable before there was cable due to amplifiers, a rooftop antenna, and living in the highest point in LaGrange. So elevation-wise, I had cable before there was cable. We picked up channels from probably 8 different cities that bordered Louisville. And that was how Jimmy and I got big in wrestling. So Jimmy had to go out and buy his big Weingard antenna and amplifiers and tried to create the same thing in Middletown. And so all of his stories are about he and I, our love of the wrestling business, how much we love Jackie Fargo, Jerry Lawler, Jimmy Valiant, Joe LeDuc, all those guys from that era. You didn't hear so much about Bill Dundee, but all the guys from that era. And so every time they'd be up and down the road, that would be Jimmy's rant. And then apparently Jimmy's high-pitched voice got drug into it. And then I am the brunt of all the stories. And as a matter of fact, when Vince McMahon met me for the first time, we were backstage in Louisville. I think we were getting ready to have Rico Constantino and John Cena take on Shelton Benjamin and Brock Lesnar for the OVW tag titles. And we were the match before Raw started. And I met Vince for the first time that night. So when I walked up to him, I said, "How are you, Mr. McMahon?" Copying who was
Briscoe.
Yeah.
He looks at me. He says, "Oh my God, on 2 levels." And I looked at him. He says, "Number 1, you're real, and number 2, not another one. That just let Briscoe call me Mr. McMahon.
Yeah.
And but finding out I was real was the biggest crack up of all.
Now, Kenny, let me ask you this. You know, the wrestling that you were picking up, you know, and everybody you mentioned, you know, I mean, of course I knew of them, but you know, in my neck of the woods, we had WWF.
Right.
You know, luckily, you know, my second outlet was getting to see Gordon Soley, you know, in Florida. I got to see all that. But I have to ask you this, Kenny.
Okay.
Now, with all these stations you were picking up, were you also privy to the WWF at that time?
No. The only time that we got that is when, if I'm not mistaken, it was WOR out of New York.
Yeah,
May have been
that's right.
WOR.
Yep.
When our old friend Weasel Dooley, that was his nickname, lived in New Albany, Indiana. He was the first among us to get cable, and he lived in. Yeah, that's why we had to go to New Albany. So we went to New Albany, Indiana, once a month, and would catch the big New York show. I think they just aired it once a month, right? 3-hour show.
Yes.
And those were the first time that we ever got to see WWF. I think it had the 3 W's at that time. And that was my first exposure to it. And that was probably the late 70s, maybe even, it was late 70s.
Now, Kenny, let me ask you this, because listen, I think like, oh boy, there's a lot. You know, let me first say this, and I've said this all the time, Kenny. I swear to you, I don't have any ill will feelings towards Mr. Cornette at all. I have tried so many times to bury the hatchet. I know Jim Ross tried to get involved, and you know, Jim Cornette just flat out refuses to talk to me or have anything to do with me. And you know, I know there are several reasons for that, but this is why I want to ask you this question, Kenny. Now, from where I sat, I grew up in Long Island, New York, right? And I grew up on the WWF, you know, and I mean, I grew up on, you know, really the characters. The first people I ever saw on TV were Jimmy and Johnny Valiant and Lou Albano, and I fell in love, but I fell in love with the characters because they were the first people that I saw. And then, you know, from there, you know, the Grand Wizard and Freddie Blassie and Chief J Strongbow, the Big Cat Ernie Ladd was one of my favorites.
Loved Ernie the Cat.
Unbelievable. But I fell in love with the characters. Okay.
And I was a diehard fan of the Valiant Brothers as well.
Oh, I loved them.
I used to see them on Dick the Bruiser show. So I did have some exposure to them going back as early as maybe 72, 71, 72. And me and my dad would rotate the antenna to get those channels.
Yeah, and they were the reason, really. Like I said, I was pulling what you did. I was going through like UHF channels. And I'll never forget this, Kenny. I'm switching. All of a sudden, I come up of this picture of the Valiant Brothers and Albano. And
you can't turn from that.
You can't turn from that. And that's it. That was it. But here's my point. Years later, I got introduced to Gordon Soley, you know, from the Sunshine State.
Right.
And I even went as far as to go see a show down in Florida during that time.
Okay.
And Kenny, I'll never forget it. The match that I saw, you'll appreciate this. I was probably maybe a 13-year-old kid at the time. The match that I saw.
I was getting ready to ask you your age. And that's about when I got my first exposure to good live wrestling.
Yeah, Kenny, you were born in 60. I was born in 61.
Yes.
Okay, I'm a year younger than you. But Kenny, here's the match I saw in Florida. I saw
pointing that out, don't he?
Yeah, no, bro. The Briscoes were on the card. The great Briscoes. But here was the main event.
Gods in Florida, if I remember correctly.
Yes. Dusty Rhodes against King Curtis.
Oh my.
Okay.
Oh my.
Now, Kenny, I had never seen so much blood. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I could not. The level of blood and violence people today would not believe. It was unbelievable.
Northern wrestling to Southern wrestling.
Right. But here's my point, Kenny. So I saw the Southern wrestling. It was a lot more violent than I was used to on the WWF. Soon after that, I started to get to see AWA. They had a whole different brand there. Scott Hall, the Gagnes, Vader, all those guys were just starting out. Yeah, Bachwinkle. Yeah, all those guys were over there. But like Kenny, here's my deal. This is where I kind of think is one of the issues Jim has with me. Okay. I was a fan of the WWF because that's what I grew up on.
Right.
When I saw Florida wrestling, when I saw, wrestling the AWA from Minnesota, I didn't hate those wrestling organizations because they were different than the WWF. They were just different. And I immediately understood, well, man, I guess that's how wrestling is in the South. I guess that's how wrestling is in the Midwest. And that really helped me down the road when I had to work with people like Jerry Jarrett, and I had to work with people like Eric Bischoff, Bill Watts, because I understood the territories that they came from, and their brand of wrestling was different than mine.
Than yours.
So what I'm getting at is this, Kenny, you're used to everything going on in your area, in Kentucky, everybody you just named. Now, when you see WWF on WOR for the first time, you absolutely hate this product because it's not what you're used to.
Are you asking me if that's how I felt?
Yes. Explain that to me, though, Kenny.
I was bored to death. And this is why. And this is because of how the production was done. We got 3 hours of crap matches of all one-sided, job matches. Job matches.
Right.
We would. I'm sorry, I quoted that wrong. We would get 2 hours and 52 minutes of those. And then we'd finally get the match we wanted to see at the end of the night. And what would happen? The time would run out. You would have to see the rest of the match another time.
Right.
And you weren't going to see it because that was how you drew people to the Coliseums to come and see a great match. They weren't going to give it to you for free on television. They'd give you the teaser. Well, Memphis didn't work that way. You always had a story. Everybody was involved in the storyline from the top guys to the bottom. And everybody was involved some way, shape, or form to make you want to see that entire card. I did not gather so much of that. And of course, I'm seeing 1 3-hour show a month.
Right.
You probably have studio shows and things like up there that maybe the Sheik was running or whoever. I don't know if you got those broadcast or not, because I saw those too. And they were done a little bit differently. Piper and the groups over in Oregon, and then you got the Cow Palace. So many different variations. And I liked the studio wrestling because that's seemed to be how the stories were told, and you got intimate with the characters. There was no way for me to get intimate with what I was watching with WWF, but then again, I watched Dick the Bruiser shows out of Indianapolis when it was Bruiser, Crusher, the Legionnaires, the Valiant Brothers, Bobo Brazil, all those guys, and I, for whatever reason, loved that show because normally you get Pepper Gomez, Paul Christie, so many of them, I can't name them all. And that show captured me in a different way because you know what? That wrestling was real, Vince.
Right.
Yeah, the Bruiser and the Crusher and those guys, they were real.
Yeah.
There might be some doubt about this nonsense down here in Memphis. And this is me at 14, 13, 12 going, this stuff down here might be, I don't know. But that stuff up there is real.
You mean when they wheeled out Dr. Frank, you were still kind of buying it?
In a pine box,
yeah.
Right?
Kenny, it's so funny that you mentioned that because, listen, man, I'm not lying to you. When I was 14 years old, there was actual heels that scared the crap out of me. The one
may I tell you my first trip to a wrestling? Louisville Gardens, about 14 years old, first time I'd ever been to a live match. And Jerry Lawler was not on the card that night, and I was so disappointed. But the main event that night was the Interns and Dr. Ken Ramey against the Bounty Hunters and Cashbox Kent. Mm-hmm. 2 managers, 2 sets of heels. Crowd didn't know who to be for. One of the most violent matches I've ever seen in my life. Fans were throwing up at ringside over the stuff they were seeing going on in the ring. I ran from the cheap seats to where I had my $2.50 ticket to run down and filter my way through ringside. It was the first time I'd ever been. I'm going to see this stuff up close. And I'm getting down there, and I got so close. I don't think I want to be here. These are scary guys. Look, any of these four can kill me. Hell, the managers can kill me. I'm getting back out of here. And I didn't know if I ever wanted to go again.
Yeah,
I was scared of the bad guys.
When I
14 years of age.
You know, Kenny, the way it was, and Vince McMahon Sr., he had a great way of doing this, even in New York. You know, every month, this was the heel that was going to be Bruno. He just convinced you this time Bruno's going to lose. And bro, I'll never forget the name that the one guy that used to scare me above all. You know, Waldo Von Erich. You remember Waldo Von Erich?
He is a historian of wrestling. I remember some Von Erichs. Don't remember him.
Chris, do you remember Waldo, the German?
Yeah. Dude, he got them taken off of TV in Canada for the infamous pie joke. I don't know if you know that story.
I don't know that. What is that? Do you tell me the story?
I heard it from Cornette, and basically Waldo got on TV. I don't remember which territory in Canada it was, but he came on and he said, in a thick German accent, what is the difference between a Jew and a pie?
Oh,
and
no, I've heard this.
The announcer very silently just kind of looked around, and Waldo finished it with a pie doesn't scream when you put it in the oven.
Oh, whoa, that aired on television?
Good night, everybody.
Yeah,
Good night.
Oh, my God.
I've never seen the interview, but according to Cornette, that's what killed this territory. It was on TV.
I have heard that story. I didn't realize Waldo Von Erich.
But can you imagine? I mean, when I look at wrestling today, Kenny, I can't imagine that back in the day we were actually afraid of heels.
Yeah. Now, at age 14, you didn't go in assuming every single thing was real, I bet.
No, not at all.
No.
Not at all. Kenny,
I didn't either. Yeah. I had to convince Cornette that world title matches were not real.
Yeah, no, Kenny.
But those world title matches are real. Well, they're working anything. They're working the title matches, Jimmy.
You know, Kenny, I'm telling you, like, I immediately was drawn to the characters. You know, because they back then. They were larger than life. I mean, Kenny, the people you named. I mean, so much, bro. Joe LeDuc. Can you imagine him in today's business? Like, who would even be able to compete on that level?
I was terrified of him. I met Terry Funk backstage, and I told a story on my Bowling Alley podcast about Terry Funk chasing me through the Louisville Gardens, and I knew I'd been set up because Lawler and I got to be pretty close friends at an early age, and he had me hold his crown. And then, and the last thing he says to me, he says, Kenny, don't you let anything happen to this crown. So I know, oh God, something is, I'm like 17, 18 years old in high school at Oldham County High. Here comes Terry Funk, but in the prime of his life, putting on the best matches he's ever done. He comes out and he does not take his eyes off me in that crown. I want that crown. And I'm going, if I let him get the crown, Lawler's going to kill me. If he gets to the crown, I might get killed. I was convinced Terry Funk would kill me and not think twice about it. He would pay the fine, whatever the fine was, for killing a fan at ringside and just go on about his day. And he chased me all over the Louisville Gardens. I probably as an inner rib with Lawler that I had no clue at that time because I just figured Funk went into business for himself and wanted the crown worse than he wanted Lawler. And he ran me to death that night. And that was when I knew they took me backstage to meet him in Rupp Arena a few weeks after that, and I was terrified to go meet him.
Yeah,
no, that's all right. You can tell him about me.
Hey, Kenny, walk me through this. Walk me through this, because from what you're telling me, you should be able to tell me this better than anybody. Obviously, on the East Coast, my introduction to Jerry Lawler came through Andy Kaufman. That's where I was first introduced. I got to tell you this, Kenny. Years later, when Jim Cornette was talking to me,
I know he was. I was there for those days.
He gave me so many.
Y'all even rode together.
Yes,
right?
He gave me so many tapes, and he goes, Vince, I want you to watch these tapes so like you'll understand where I'm coming from. Hey, Kenny, I watched the tapes, and I got to tell you, that's where I was introduced to the empty arena with
oh my
Kenny. I thought that's where I got the idea for the halftime with Mick and Rock. I thought that was the greatest thing I had ever seen.
It ranks right up there with mine still to this day, especially the unedited version, which I'm sure is what you got.
Yeah, I loved it. I fell in love with it. Okay, I was blessed to be able to work with Lawler for 5 years, to really get to know him and just see the genius of Jerry Lawler. But let me ask you this, bro. Since you pointed out, Kenny, that you were immediately drawn to Lawler, and that's who you were first fan of. Kenny, explain that to me, because listen, when you see Lawler, he's built like a regular guy.
Regular guy.
He's not a monster. He's not Joe LeDuc with the coughed up, forehead. He's not Abdullah. He's not any of these guys. Lawler, when you see him, is a regular guy. So now with you having been there in Memphis, a 14-year-old kid, explain to me the lore of Jerry Lawler back in those days. I'm really interested in it.
And as you figured out, I'm definitely not the only one.
Oh, absolutely not.
But I considered myself absolutely his biggest and most studious fan. I thought I knew every single thing there was to know about Jerry Lawler. I knew his mannerisms. I knew how to talk like him. I knew how to do interviews like him. I combed my hair like him. I was a little Jerry Lawler. Yeah, I was little one time, Ben.
You gave a cousin.
Pardon?
You gave a cousin a pile driver once.
I gave my cousin a pile driver on a concrete floor to teach him a lesson. Only there's one thing: Lawler knew how to work, and at that time, I did not.
Right.
And the pile driver didn't work out so well for my cousin, and I was told I couldn't do those anymore. But the lure is how believable he made every interview. You believed every word that come out of his mouth, even from 1974, when it was Jerry Lawler, Jim White, and Sam Bass. Sam Bass was the only manager I ever knew that never had to speak, because Jerry Lawler was going to do all that for him. There'd go months that we wouldn't know if Sam Bass knew how to speak. Jerry would come out and do the interviews, and then he would do the interview for Sam Bass if he was going to be involved in the match. He would talk for Sam. But it was how believable he made everything was the lure for me. But you're right. You look at him, he's no Hulk Hogan. He's no Rocky Johnson. He's none of these big guys. And we didn't have that many big guys back then. When Paul Ellering came in, that was kind of the start of the jacked up muscle guys coming in. He kind of started that. We didn't see many of them before then, because when they were in, they were big jacked up muscle guys who couldn't work with a nickel. They couldn't speak. Say that word if they had a mouthful, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
They were, it just wasn't their cup of tea. Wrestling did not work out for the big muscle guys down here so much, maybe as it did up in New York for Vince. Yeah. Because down here, they just rarely worked out. You got to remember, we had Sting. We had the Warrior. We had Hulk Hogan. We had Brutus the Barber Beefcake during their first matches. Vince, they were horrible. Jarrett couldn't wait to get rid of them. I've interviewed Jerry on my show before and talked about how he could not wait to get them out of the territory. And then the next thing you know, Hulk Hogan is Thunderlips in a Rocky movie, and then becomes the biggest name in the history of professional wrestling.
What was it about? What was it about that breed that somebody like Jerry could not wait to get them out of territory? Was it that just the personality wasn't there, the connection with the people wasn't there? What fell short?
I would say a good part of both of those. People do not want to believe this to this day, but I swear to you, this happened. We were in the back of Rupp Arena, and a lot of times they would film their interviews there after the shows were over. They were in like take 54 of an interview, which with Terry Bolin. What do they call him then?
Was it Terry Boulder?
Terry Boulder.
Yeah,
he was Terry Boulder here in Memphis, and they had Brutus the Barber Beefcake with him as his little brother, Eddie Boulder. Those two couldn't do an interview to save their life. He got so mad at take 54, Lawler did, trying to get an interview out of him. He said, "Kenny, will you please God say?" He said, "This is a 17-year-old kid. He's getting ready to tell you what he's going to do to Bill Dundee down at the Louisville Gardens on Tuesday night. Kenny, tell him what you're going to do to Bill Tuesday night." I was really, and I'm thinking, oh God, now I'm going to get everybody. So I do the interview, and he says, "There you go, one take. Are you convinced that Kenny's going to screw Bill Dundee up?" Then that ain't the word he used. Down at the Louisville Gardens Tuesday. "Can you please do that? A 17-year-old kid just showed you how to do an interview. Could you please give me an interview?" And I don't know that he ever got anything he liked. He got something he took, but I don't know that he got anything he liked. And we were all not surprised when he left. It was evident that they weren't going to pan out around here. And Jarrett still to this day swears that Sting and Warrior were the worst tag team in the history of pro wrestling, and especially in Memphis.
Kenny,
and then you see what they became when they went elsewhere.
And it's funny because I still talk about it to this day. And you just said it, and what you just said about Lawler, I could make the same argument for Bruno Sammartino. He was the Italian. He was the everyman. You believed him. It's that connection with the crowd that is almost non-existent today.
And you know what is strange about what Jerry did is that he was able to do it at extreme levels as a heel. He was the most hated man. Oh my God, they hated him. He got to the point where he had to pack a gun. Hopefully it had blanks in it because he'd fire them off just to get to his car.
Yeah.
And that was as a heel in the early days. And then as a babyface to get over to the level he did as a babyface.
Kenny, why can't people do that today? Where did that art get lost along the way?
I'm about to tell you.
Okay.
Number one, we made it way too easy for people to be able to get into the wrestling business.
Okay.
Vince, I knew everybody. I'd known Jerry Lawler since I was 14 years old. I was best friends with Jimmy Cornette. You know when I got in the wrestling business and could actually pick up a paycheck? When I was 27.
Wow. So
I knew everybody. And everybody knew I wanted in. It was my dream. But they made you earn it. They were convinced I couldn't take it because in amateur, I was 212-0 at Oldham County. That's no BS. I was a pretty damn good amateur wrestler. And I didn't like when me and Jimmy worked together, I wouldn't put him over. So he was convinced I would never put anybody over in studio wrestling either, that I would go into business for myself. I wouldn't want to lose. I said, hey, if they're paying me, I'll do whatever the hell they want. It doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. And I never got convinced, but you know who finally hired me and gave me my job? I don't know if you read up on it or not. Nick Goulas. Mm-hmm. I met him at a service merchandise in Nashville, Tennessee. And we got to talking, and he found out that I was good friends with Lawler and Cornette. And he says, well, I'm getting ready to start a wrestling television show here. And he says, I'm going to make you the next Jerry Lawler. And I said, well, I've tried that bumping stuff. And I said, I think I talk a little better than a bump. Why don't we try the talking thing? So that was when he had me as the host of his television show. And then eventually managing Tojo Yamamoto, which eventually led to a little background stuff with Jimmy and Smokey, which eventually led to Dennis Corluza and some work, which led to OVW.
But you know what, Kenny? Here's the thing. There are still a lot of wrestlers.
Oh, I didn't finish answering your question. Okay. I'm sorry. I apologize for that. Okay. Nobody wants to be a heel anymore, Vince. We talked about this with somebody here recently. Nobody wants to be a heel. It's too easy to get in the business, so they don't appreciate how difficult it was to get in to begin with. And number two, they used to make him apologize at OVW. Well, they tried to get him to apologize. Yeah, he wouldn't do it because I wouldn't let him either, because the fans hated him, because he was a heel. Because he wouldn't sign autographs after the show, because he wouldn't shake hands and kiss babies. In the retrospect of the show, you know, until you get in that car and drive away, the show is still on. You're a heel when you pull up. You're a heel when you pull away. Now, if they run into you at Walmart and you're in there shopping, I would treat them how they treated me. If they treated me like a fan and wanted to get to instigate me, then that's okay. We can do that. Or if they, hey, man, I really appreciate your work. It's a pleasure meeting you. Okay, we can do that too. But at the shows, you're a heel. No one wants to do that anymore. Everybody wants to high five the fans as they're leaving the building. Everybody wants to pose for selfies. Everybody wants to hug the women. Yeah. And nobody wants any heat after the show's over.
You know what is, Kenny? I think this is what you're saying, and this is what I saw a lot of, especially in my years at TNA. Everybody is a mark for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody wanted to. I think this younger generation, their introduction to the wrestling business, a lot of it was through video games.
I've said this before.
Yeah, not like you meeting Jerry Lawler when you're 14 years old. These guys played video games, and they wanted to do wrestling, video game wrestling moves
Yes.
in a ring. Okay, so here's the biggest problem I see. They're marks for themselves. They got in the business.
They're all the greatest.
Yeah, they got in the business for all the wrong reasons. They know more than you and I will ever know.
Combined.
Kenny, here's the thing that blows me away. And this is where it's total ignorance on their part.
All right.
None of them understand it's a freaking business. As a wrestler, you have a shelf life of so many years, and you better make as much money as you possibly can. None of them understand that. I got to tell you, Kenny, you'll appreciate this. When TNA first started and Jerry Jarrett was in charge, right?
All right.
Some of the payoffs to the boys were like $100 a match, $150. And I was like, Jerry, you can't pay these guys. Jerry Jarrett looked at me as serious as a heart attack, and he said, Vince, he goes, are you kidding me? These guys will pay us to be on our TV. And you know what, Kenny?
And that happens.
He was absolutely right.
Yeah,
he was absolutely right. They have no inkling whatsoever that this is a business and the end game is to make money. That's why when I see all these circus monkeys with all their high spots and with all the stunts that they do, all they're doing is cutting their career short.
Well, of course. And 15 false finishes in a match. And I watched Ox Baker get disqualified because he kicked the wrestler beyond the 5 count. No one gets disqualified anymore. There's no reason to have a referee because there's no rules.
He's there to take bumps.
You could count 3 from the desk.
Yeah.
I don't know why referees are in there. That doesn't make any sense. And here's the other thing, and I bet you'll agree with me on this. When's the last time you saw a top heel who was actually scared? Knew he was going to get maybe short of wrestling The Undertaker.
Yeah.
Short of him.
Yeah.
No one's scared. I don't know if I've seen Triple H scared once in my life.
Yeah. And here's
Lawler was the biggest coward there was.
Yeah.
He was a backbiting coward. He wasn't going to beat you fair. He didn't want to beat you fair.
It's not. Here's my deal. I say this all the time, Kenny. If I was born in this generation, I would not be a wrestling fan. If I was tuning into this stuff for the first time, I would not be a fan of it. I'll tell you why. I saw wrestling. I know what wrestling is. This ain't wrestling. This is Circus Soleil. So the first thing they need to do is change the name of it. Call it something else.
Call it something else.
This is not. It can't be wrestling if there's no psychology involved.
I 100% agree with you.
The second thing, Kenny, can we stop? Can we lose the term finishing move when everybody kicks out of a finishing move in every single match?
They don't matter anyway.
Kenny, what does a finishing move mean?
The end of the match.
You're finished.
You're finished is the end of the match,
Kenny,
I guess.
Listen, let's forget this crap wrestling today. Let's go back to your era. Okay?
Go ahead.
Kenny, I want to talk about this because I am a huge mark for this to this day. I have every video of it. I've seen all the documentaries. I've studied this like nobody's business.
I'm anxious to hear what it is.
And keep in mind, Kenny, I was there for the Attitude Era, okay, which, probably the biggest boom in wrestling, just number-wise. Mm-hmm. People watching. I was there for it all. I don't care what anybody says. I never saw heat to the level that I saw in the Lawler-Andy Kaufman angle.
Oh man.
Kenny, I have to ask you this because I've seen so much on it. I've asked Lawler questions to nauseum. Here's my deal. Any footage you watch, how funny is it that there was so much heat on Andy Kaufman and the guy wasn't even a wrestler? I mean, if that doesn't tell you something right there, nothing will. But Kenny, I can't believe that this guy was able to draw so much heat. When you watch that footage,
Yeah.
they would. I don't know how this guy walked out of an arena. I never saw any angle in my life generate this much heat. Am I off base here?
No, you're not. And here's the thing. That thing was kept so tight and so secret that not even me and Cornette knew for sure what was on the up and up and what wasn't. We knew for a fact that Kaufman and Lawler had to be working together. It just had to be, but they wouldn't even let us know. You could be the closest friend of Jerry Lawler or Andy Kaufman, and you weren't going to get a straight answer out of them. That's why the movie, what was the name of the movie?
Man in the Moon.
Man in the Moon. That's when a lot of that stuff came out that we were all kind of a little bit surprised about, because Jerry had sworn up one side and down the other that a lot of the stuff wasn't true, and then he finally confessed to it in the movie. Kind of like Pete Rose and betting on baseball, I guess. He stuck to that story for quite a long time. But no, they had this actor guy come down here from Hollywood who was on the show Taxi, and he started wrestling the women down here, and then he started cutting promos on the women. So the women immediately hated him. Well, you got to remember, women were half the audience at a Memphis Mid-South Coliseum show. They were there to get a date with the wrestlers. So now he's pissed off half the audience without any trouble at all. And it don't take too much more to get the men to say, well, who the heck does this guy think he is? So he just knew how to anger everybody. And I wasn't aware until here recently. I just found out that you knew him, I think, before Lawler did. Did you not?
Who's that?
Andy Kaufman.
No, personally?
That's a rumor I'd heard.
Oh, I wish. No way.
Well,
I never met the man in my life. I
someone
wish.
Told me that someone up north knew him before Lawler did, and that they passed. I was told that Kaufman offered this deal to Vince.
Vince Senior. Vince.
Okay, Vince Senior. Okay.
Yeah.
Because today Vince McMahon would not pass on that deal.
No.
And so that was what I'd heard, that they passed, and then Lawler was second choice, and Lawler just jumped all over it and went to Jarrett with it. And I don't know how much money Kaufman made, but everybody else made a lot of money.
You know, one thing, Kenny, that drives me crazy when I watch wrestling today, the heels don't get any more heat. The art of putting heat on the heels has disappeared. It no longer exists. What I cannot come up with an explanation why. Listen, I get the TV PG, I get all that crap. TV PG does not mean that a heel can't get heel heat anymore.
It was TVG when I was a kid, and they got heat.
What happened to the art of the heels getting the heat?
All right, what are your favorite TV shows, Vince? What do you enjoy watching? Name.
Today, I don't watch too much. I don't watch too much TV, Kenny, to be honest with you.
Sadly, I do.
Okay, talk to me.
And a lot of the shows that I watch that really entertain me, I hate the entire cast. They are excellent at getting you to hate a certain man. Just when you think they're a babyface, they turn out to be the biggest heel.
Right.
They are doing television right, because for me to be invested into a show, I have to have somebody I love and or somebody I hate. Now, in wrestling, you got to have both, because I pointed this out before. Nobody was a bigger fan of Jerry Lawler than me. Well, if Jerry Lawler were wrestling at Radford Tyndall Tuesday night at the Louisville Gardens, that was the week I was going to save $2.50, because I didn't care to see Jerry Lawler wrestle Radford Tyndall. But if he was going to be wrestling Joe LeDuc, Bill Dundee, the Dream Machine, or Hulk Hogan, whoever, then obviously you went, because you had somebody you hated and somebody you loved, somebody you wanted to see win, somebody you wanted to see lose. You have to have that in order to have an interest from the fans. Well, now everybody's, like you said, everybody's smarter than we are. We don't know anything. They get on their little forums. They're trying to bury Roman Reigns. Roman Reigns, I think, has a good look. I think the sad part is that they let Roman talk. Mm-hmm. And Roman is not to that stage yet. Roman maybe would be better as a heel with a manager. I don't know. Look at what Paul Heyman has done for Brock Lesnar. Do you think Brock would be anywhere where he's at in the WWE today? And I'm not the biggest fan of the product that Paul put on at ECW, but as a manager, I wish I had some of the talents that Paul Heyman has. I don't think he, Jimmy, or me or anything alike, but oh my good Lord, Paul Heyman can rile up. How can you like Paul Heyman? From a character standpoint, I'm not just talking about it as a person.
Right.
From a character standpoint, how can you possibly like that man? And poor Brock Lesnar, he's another one that wasn't gifted in the promo stage of things. He needs Heyman, and him and Heyman are perfect for each other. But they faded away the managers. If you'll remember, I bet all you could get were divas anymore. And then they started making the divas all wrestle. Well, how many matches did you see Miss Elizabeth wrestle?
None.
But who was more over than Elizabeth on a wrestling card?
Nobody.
And so you don't have to make them all wrestlers. You can have divas. You can have female wrestlers. Beth Phoenix was one of the better female wrestlers that I ever saw come through OVW. I think Mickie James was an excellent female wrestler. So you got good female wrestlers. Why do we have to clog it up with the ones who can't work at all and make it difficult for those who can? And then that's just talking on the women's division. Well, the men's division can be much the same way. If you get some of these guys in there that can't work and they're just big and they got a good look and can't talk, they're kind of clogging it up for those that can. Look at Shawn Michaels. You meet Shawn Michaels in person. Vince, I have every confidence that you could walk up to Shawn and you could think, yeah, I could take him, right? I know I did. I know my son did. But as an entertainer and performer in the ring, it was a whole nother story.
Yep.
And he went on to be one of the greatest. I mean, he is one that down here may not have been taken too seriously. But then again, you have Bill Dundee, 5'7" tall if he's an inch, and 215 pounds. Who could think Bill Dundee could whip anybody? Well, somehow Jerry Lawler convinced the world that Bill could not only whip him, but anybody he got in the ring with, be it Joe LeDuc or whoever. And that has gone away.
But
because now they crap on the little guys no sooner than they get there. The WWE's got a few of them, and the first thing you hear is how little they are. And I'm probably as bad at it as anybody. I'll look at them and go, come on. That guy's going to whip Brock Lesnar. That guy's going to whip The Undertaker. Stop it.
But Kenny, here's the problem. You got the same guy in charge. That's what boggles my mind. Listen. Again, one of the reasons, Jim does not like me was during the Attitude, I changed a lot as it pertains to the wrestling business. However, I do know and understand there is a foundation, and there are things in wrestling that will never change, nor should ever change.
Yeah.
You need the foundation. I understand that. And I never moved away from that foundation. Today, they're totally off the foundation. And what blows me away is you still got the same guy calling the shots. Has Vince McMahon himself forgotten exactly what it was that brought his company to the dance?
Prince, give your opinion on this, because I'm anxious, because I think you and I are much in the same lines here. Tell Vince your theory on this.
I feel like Vince has gone back to doing what he always did. But if you look at back in the new generation when he had the TL Hoppers and he had all the career-based guys, I feel like he's gone back to having the guys with the interchangeable gimmicks. And that's just his, flight pattern. That's his holding pattern. That's what he knows. When you were there and you were doing the Attitude Era that you were primarily in charge of with Ferrara, that was your baby, and he was just kind of, nursing it along, I guess, however you want to view it. And now that there's no Vince Russo, there's no Jim Cornette, there's no Bill Watts, there's much less outside interference, just this interchangeable 20 guys on a writing team, it goes back to Vince's vision of, well, we can come up with these comic book style gimmicks that we can put on anybody, like the Matadors. You could have gotten any group of guys and made them Los Matadors. The Vic Victor and Connors, the Ascension. Any two big jacked up guys, you could have put face paint and pads on and made them the new Legion of Doom. And it's become so interchangeable and so repetitive and so dull that it just seems, again, like TL Hopper, like the Goon.
Chris, what you're saying is, and I say this all the time, there's nothing special.
Yeah.
What's special? What stands out when you put that show on? What stands out and slaps you across the face? It's all very vanilla. I think that's what I hear you saying.
Yeah, well, it's essentially that.
You talk about slapping you across the face. You know what was, and then they screwed them up. No sir. Help me out. I don't know. They have the cameras when they come out. God dadgummit. Now you're showing my age. Now you know I'm a year older than him.
Yeah.
The evil group that the faces of the Undertaker.
Oh, the Wyatts.
The Wyatts. Yeah. Now the Wyatts to me did stand out. I liked what they had going with the Wyatts, and then when that got over, they broke it up. Damien Sandow and The Miz, they had something going. Well, when that got over, they broke it up.
I don't get it. I don't get it.
And then with what was the name of the group that they all three were a part of? Roman and
the Shield.
The Shield. Well, the Shield gets over. And they break it up.
Yeah.
And I didn't give the Shield 100% chance of making it because they just kind of threw them up there real quick and hey, these guys are tough. And I didn't know if the fans were going to buy it or not, but eventually they did. And at NXT, when Wade Barrett was the leader, what was the name of that?
Oh, the Nexus, yeah.
Nexus. Oh my God, they had that over and then killed it. So it's like they don't want to succeed, Vince. I mean,
there's no consistency. There's no consistency.
And if you get over and it wasn't their idea, they get hot about it. Now tell me what you think of this. What I think is best, and you may or may disagree with me, is that let's say you got a round table in a room, putting the shows together. And whatever my 2 cents is worth is sitting at the table. And then you got a Jim Cornette over here, and you got Vince Russo sitting here. You got Eric Bischoff sitting here, and then you got one of the McMahons, because right now you just got 3 McMahons running the show and then whatever input the writers have. And but you're only getting the McMahon perspective. What if we all have a little something to say? And then we all are adult enough to work together to say, okay, this will work, this will work. Well, let's try this and let's give this 6 weeks. And if it doesn't work, we can abort and go a different direction. Rico Constantino, I was told by Danny Davis and Jim Cornette that was the worst idea ever in the history of wrestling, was to make the Gladiator champion, the biggest babyface in the history of OVW, a heel. I said, well, he's been injured. He's been gone. And I think I have something that'll work. Give me 6 weeks. Well, it took me and Rico both begging Jimmy to give us that 6 weeks. We had Rico over as one of the biggest heels ever in OVW. They hated his guts. Now, was that my idea? Probably have a hard time getting that out of Jimmy or Danny now. I don't know how much Kenny. As a matter of fact, they don't even give me credit for coming up with the name Bolin Services, which my brother came up with. My old buddy Jimmy Cornette tried to take credit for that too. He come up with Bolin Management. He wanted a BM on my briefcase. Well, what are they going to chant, Bruce? I just call you Bruce. You can end this call now. If you
no, that's fine. That's quite all right. That's quite
Thanks. All right. I used to see Bruce on a weekly basis in the back, and he would go into the Cornette Kenny Bolin. I got plenty of that as well. But what do you think is going to get over more? Me walking out with a BM on my briefcase, or me walking out with a BS? I mean, my brother.
I know.
My goofy brother come up with this.
I had, Kenny, I was reading about this too. I did not know this. Okay. Cornette went on this tirade about with me. He went on this whole tirade about the Survivor Series finish. Okay, that it was all his idea. I had nothing to do with it.
Refresh my memory on the finish.
The screw job.
Montreal Screwjob.
I think we've all taken a little credit for that one.
Kenny, let me explain something. Kenny, here's the deal. Like, I got to be honest with you. Like, I know over the years I've forgotten some things. Yeah. So, like, when somebody says to me, oh, no, that was my idea, or that was this person's idea, or that was, I don't immediately say, no, that was my idea, because I know for a fact I've forgotten some stuff.
Right.
This I know I did not forget, because, and I hear you got a little history with this. This is the only reason why I'm bringing this up.
Kenny. Go right ahead. Go right ahead.
All right, Kenny.
Oh, I have a lot of history with that, believe me.
The three of us, it was me, Vince, and Cornette at Vince's house. Okay?
Okay.
I had no idea what was going on the entire week of Brett refusing to do a job for Shawn Michaels. Okay?
Right. I know. Now, I was getting the feedback from your all's meetings.
Yeah.
along the same time. Then Cornette would call me, and then we would go over it.
Yeah.
And then I would put in some input and whatever. So now
That's
you're
what I
seeing
read.
how I got tied into this.
Yeah. Okay. So let me tell you what happened. We're there at the house. The Survivor Series is that weekend. Okay.
Yeah.
It's me, Vince, and Cornette.
Okay.
Vince takes me to the side, and he says to me, Vince, Brett is going to call me in a few minutes. He says, I want you to be on the phone secretly as the third party to hear everything that goes down in this conversation.
Okay.
Okay. So I'm on the call with Vince and Brett. Brett has no idea I'm on the call. Okay. Now, Kenny, I'm hearing firsthand Vince McMahon is throwing every possible scenario you can imagine to Bret Hart. From A, B, C, D, every idea you could possibly think of to get the belt off of Bret, because Vince did not trust Eric Bischoff. It had nothing to do with him not trusting Bret. Medusa had just dropped the title in the garbage.
Exactly.
He was like, that's not going to happen with my world heavyweight title.
Yeah, I don't blame him.
I don't blame him either. I'm 100% in his camp with that.
Okay.
So he's pitching Bret every idea. Bret is poo-pooing everything.
That's what I'd heard.
Yeah,
that's
okay.
what I'd heard.
So finally, Vince says, okay, Bret, let me get back with creative, and then I'll get back to you. Okay? So, Kenny, we went through a round two creatively. He calls Bret again, and I'm on the phone with Bret. He doesn't know.
Okay.
And the same thing. Now Vince is throwing 6 other scenarios. Bret turns down every
one of them.
So now I hope you can understand, being a part of these conversations, I was so freaking frustrated.
I can imagine.
Because Vince was trying to do everything. Everything. Yeah. So finally, Kenny, now we get back to the table. You know, Jim was not privy to these conversations. It was the 3 of us.
Right.
And Kenny, it's about 9 o'clock at night. We've been there for 12 hours now.
Oh, Lord.
Kenny, out of pure frustration, because I've been hearing Bret all day crap on everything. Out of pure frustration, I blurt out, screw it, Vince. Screw it. Let Sean put him in his own move, the sharpshooter, and have the referee call for the bell. Screw it. Like, Kenny, it was out of pure frustration. Like, bro, there's no other scenarios we could throw by Bret. Screw it.
Right.
So basically, with that, you know, Vince didn't say a word.
Yeah.
And we left. Bro,
right.
Vince avoided me like the plague for the next 3 days. So, Kenny, I'm going into the Survivor Series now. I don't know what the finish is.
Right.
I don't know who Vince has talked to.
Right.
I don't have a clue, right? So I'm sitting there watching the Survivor Series, sitting next to Taker.
Okay.
Now, Kenny, I don't have a clue what this finish is. All of a sudden, I see.
I had a clue.
I didn't know. I see Sean put him in the sharpshooter, and now I'm saying, don't tell me.
Yeah.
Hebner calls for the bell. It was like literally verbatim what I just spewed out to Vince. Undertaker threw a fit. If Undertaker would have known then it was my suggestion, I think he would have punched me right in the mouth.
Taker got hot. Taker got hot.
Oh my gosh!
So he thought it was okay for Bret to crap on everything when he's taking the money and running to the competition.
But no,
thought that was cool.
But nobody really knew that he was crapping on every idea. Nobody really was privy to that. But he took the chair, threw it across the room. You know, the whole 9 yards.
Oh
so,
my!
Now a couple of
days.
I
wasn't there.
Yeah. Now, Kenny, I'll go one step further. A couple of days later, Friday night. It's a Friday night. It's about midnight. Like 3 days later, I get a call from Owen Hart crying.
Mm-hmm.
Vince, Brett is telling me that if I come back to the WWE, he's going to disown me. He wants nothing to do with me. You got to talk to him.
He was going to take it out on Owen?
He told Owen, if you go back to the WWE, our brotherhood is over.
Oh, that's what okay.
Yeah.
That I could see.
So now I said, Owen, I said, bro, you need to call Vince. This is not in my place. You need to call Vince. And Owen said, Vince, I've been trying to call him all night. I can't get a hold of Vince. You need to do this for me. Now, Kenny, you knew Owen.
Yes.
If you knew Owen, you loved Owen.
Yes.
I was getting ready to point out that him and Chris he loved Chris. And he put Chris over at every town we ever went to. He had Canadian bottled water waiting on him.
Yeah.
Owen was he was almost too good for the wrestling business.
He was too good. Not almost. He was too good.
Critically acclaimed producers Kayfabe Commentaries bring you the most candid shoot interview ever with Sabu, nephew of the legendary Sheik.
Would your aunt be talking business?
Of course.
With the Sheik?
Oh, yeah. And Carney. She can speak Carney better than me.
That's amazing.
Oh, yeah.
Prepare to explore the darkest corners of the man behind Sabu.
I would have stopped pain pills entirely if I was out of pain. Because I've been a little too long at the dance myself.
You feel now you've been too long at the dance?
Breaking Kayfabe with Terry Sabu Brunk, now available on DVD and on demand at shootinterviews.com.